All right, day 2 of talking about shit I really don't want to talk about, but it's important, so I'm talking about it. Again, this video is going to have a high potential for demonetization because it's political. So help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Because a lot of people don't realize when you get content flagged for something and not advertiser friendly, it takes them 24 to 48 hours to review your video, and that means the bulk of your monetization on a time-sensitive video goes right down the toilet. So relying on YouTube ads for this kind of content is not smart. Unfortunately, this stuff is actually really important, and, part of my infamy on the internet is as somebody who did spend a lot of time in the trenches as a game reporter. I do not consider myself a reporter anymore because I don't believe you can do actual reporting on games anymore. There's not enough access. So help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Again, patrons are going to get to do birthday fun next month too, so become a patron. Or there's a PayPal link if you want to do a one-time thing and not get the extra content. I appreciate that too. Every bit helps. Yesterday I talked about the, excuse me, the all outright online culture war surrounding those private boys' school students who were little idiots to an Indigenous elder. That happened in the shadow of a big black eye for the media. Courtesy of a BuzzFeed report that broke late Friday, I want to say, that basically said that Michael Cohen lied to Congress on the direct instructions of Donald Trump. Oh, by the way, there was written corroboration for this via apparently emails and texts or something like that. It has become a huge story because the Mueller team themselves, a spokesperson for the Mueller team, who is investigating any potential ties between the Trump campaign and Russia, they don't respond to anything. So the fact that somebody came out and actively knocked down at least parts of this story, OMG, right? You get this. Lawmakers respond to BuzzFeed News disputed report as the media company's editor-in-chief doubles down. I'll link this so you can get an idea. I've already sort of gone through it, but read it if you want. I watched this develop in real time. I'm something of a news junkie, and I prefer to watch things happen in real time so I can see it without the bias of whatever outlet is covering it. I don't want to have to read 16 sources to get a good sense of what's going on. And I happen to be watching this stuff because we knew Trump was going to make a speech that turned out to be a whole lot of nothing on the government shutdown on Saturday. And this story was going crazy in the lead up to that. Now, the big argument that's been going on right now is whether other media sources, CNN, NBC, CBS, ABC, the mainstream, should have covered the reporting of another service that they could not corroborate. They could not independently verify, to use the term of art. And this was a tough one. If I were a media outlet, if I were the editor, if I were the director of programming or something like that for a news outlet, I would have been report the story, say we have not been able to independently corroborate it, this is a developing story, move on. The problem is because cable news has to fill airtime, and they were squicky on the Women's March is because anti-Semitism. Oh, wow, the New York Times is a pretty reputable newspaper. We can't just go, meh, but we really don't want to, we really don't want to have to confront the fact that these freedom fighters for women that we've been building up for the last, 2-ish years might be bigots. So we're just going to notice that our story. There was a lot of that. Because I was watching MSNBC struggle with the whole thing. They allowed Tamika Mallory to gaslight the media. She seriously said, "Don't believe the media, believe me. I see you, my Jewish brothers and sisters." That's great, Tamika Mallory. The question is, what do you see us as? From what we understand from the New York Times, not that great. Just saying. But yeah, there was sort of a vacuum in news, and this filled it. And everybody went nuts and crazy and OMG exciting and churn. And they devoted far too much time to it. Now, there's a caveat here. Trump responded regarding the BuzzFeed story. And the minute the President of the United States sees a story as notable enough to respond to, that in and of itself becomes news. And there's sort of a, that is newsworthy. There is sort of a professional responsibility to cover it somewhat. I do think the stuff I saw on MSNBC was responsible, even though I think they spent too much time on it because they kept saying, like, over and over and over and over again, NBC has not been able to independently verify this story. And I know while I was watching it, every time they said it, I thought to myself, it's BuzzFeed. They have pretty sloppy standards. BuzzFeed gonna BuzzFeed. I'm not gonna get too excited. So I think they did their job. At least MSNBC/NBC News did in how they covered it. Now, of course, they can't control Democratic congresspeople and senators and presidential candidates falling all over themselves to respond and say, we need to begin impeachment proceedings, yada, 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 all that stuff. They can't control that. That is making news. That is news. When people are responding to it in that way, that is news. And God, I'm agreeing with Jake Tapper for a change. I never agree with Jake Tapper, but sometimes it happens. You're not too biased when you sometimes agree with people you can't stand. But the fact that Mueller came out, or Mueller's team came out and said basically that the details of the story are not accurate. It wasn't a complete knockdown, but obviously they think the story is flawed enough and serious enough that it warranted comment because they never comment, right? And of course, BuzzFeed then goes, we stand by our reporting. We believe it will be borne out. Well, that's nice, BuzzFeed, but you as a news service have laxer ethics than the mainstream. BuzzFeed, for the record, was the outlet that actually published the Trump dossier, the Oppo research dossier. Back in the day that had like prostitutes peeing on them, or I don't know what it is. It was an Oppo research document. And so less ethically challenged, less sloppy news organizations whose reputations mean a lot more didn't publish it because it was salacious, because most of it was probably untrue. BuzzFeed determined, based on their laxer standards, that it was newsworthy enough to do it anyway, even though a lot of it was probably crap. We know this about BuzzFeed. We also know that BuzzFeed tends to be out in front on a lot of these Trump-Russia stories because they have laxer standards, so they go to press first. They have been incredibly lucky on that front to this point. Now, it's easier with Trump than most because Trump's White House is extremely leaky and everybody talks, so it's easier to get your 3 to 5 sources to run with a story. The fact that Trump lies almost constantly makes it easier to dodge and weave, and coast for a while. Even though your ethics, your standards and practices are wanting. Remember that BuzzFeed makes money not by being right, but by people reading their website. That's the reality of click-based online journalism. Unlike a New York Times or a Washington Post, where they have to sell subscriptions, meaning people have to think that their news is of a high enough quality to subscribe. It's a different model. And so, the reporters, at least one of the reporters on this BuzzFeed article, has a pretty iffy past. He's made some huge leaps, both during the Obama administration and during the Bush administration, that turned out to be wrong. He is reckless. And being a reckless journalist does not mean that you don't get it right most of the time. What it means is when you're wrong, you're really wrong and you can ruin people. And that's generally, even as much as media standards have declined, that's still considered a bad thing by most journalists. The frustrating thing is that most journalists really want to get the story right. You get these BuzzFeeds and Gawkers and, of the world who are really more interested in getting clicks than getting the story right. And I'm not saying the reporters do this. I'm saying that, it comes from the top. The editorial is lax. But I mean, just, I see BuzzFeed, I go, meh, reliable for cat memes, not so reliable by news. I'll believe it when someone can confirm it. And then I see that this guy also had a background at Vice, and I'm like, oh, double slow down, yellow flag, let's not get too excited. And this is, you hear this has been a terrible weekend for journalism and this, that, the next thing. It didn't have to be. I don't know why people think it's terrible. The concern is that it makes everybody look bad. And the truth is, if news outlets, I don't know what CNN did. I don't watch CNN anymore. I love Don Lemon, but, I like Fareed Zakaria, even with the plagiarism stuff in his past. But I can't stand CNN's production, but I know MSNBC did slap that massive caveat on it, which meant they kind of thought it was sketch, and hosts were saying, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We need to confirm it. Even some politicians were saying we don't impeach based on a news story. We have to have evidence to file articles of impeachment. I think that was completely responsible. I think that if every news service had responded in that way of, we cannot confirm this, which is fair to say this story's out there, we can't verify it, that's completely responsible reporting, right? That's totally cool. That's the way you're supposed to do that. I do it when I report a contentious story about gaming. I say, I have not been able to verify this. I don't know. I'm acting as an analyst, sort of a pundit here, not a reporter. That's doing your job, because it is news that this is out there and all these lawmakers are responding to it, like I said. The problem is especially not every cable news outlet, never mind the internet, has the same strict standards that NBC does. And NBC even screws it up sometimes, even with that. One of the things they immediately tell you about breaking news is early reports are usually wrong somehow. And we really have to train the public to be more media literate and less knee-jerk in that regard. But culture warriors love to knee-jerk, so fat chance on that. And I get the Reliable Sources newsletter. And what's that guy, Brian Stelter? He was arguing that, the internet was all a buzz. It would have been completely irresponsible to not cover the story. I mean, this is the media landscape we live in. No BS. No. The role of the mainstream media in the age of internet news should be to stand firm and wait for corroboration, because they have the resources. And there isn't the same expectation that mainstream news, which is relatively slow and has more oversight, there's money in getting there first. But the reason people tune in over and over and over again is because they feel like they can rely on your news. The vast majority of people, 86%, are not insane political partisans. They want the news to be reliable. They don't care if it's a bit slow because they're not ready to leap to Twitter instantly. They just want it to be right. And, better right than fast. That's the mantra for mainstream news. There is pressure to get out there first. But if you're a mainstream outlet, it is more important to be right. Now, CNN is kind of in between the two. They're cable. NBC has the virtue of being sort of this cable news outgrowth of old school affiliate station news reporting. So they're a bit more old school, and I do prefer it. People crap all over me for that because they're like, they're so left wing. Like, yeah, absolutely. They have a left wing bias mostly. I wouldn't say that's true of, former Republicans like Nicole Wallace. But they do lean left. In prime time, they absolutely lean left. Chris Matthews, Chris Hayes, undoubtedly. Hardcore partisans, I don't claim to be anything but. But they do still have a relationship with the facts. I can't say that for... I stopped watching CNN because it was just like, ugh. And that's the problem. It's the excuses that the media makes after they make a mistake that make people not trust the media, not the mistake. And, we've been talking about this, not the mistake itself. And we've been talking about this in gaming for a while, right? I mean, that Overwatch thing with Ellie a while back, the way you earn cred is failing the right way. And guys like Eric Kane, and I'm so glad he continues to be cool because I really, really like him. But guys like Eric Kane went, I think we just got to admit, we got fooled. People go, all right, you can admit it. I continue to trust you. It's when you start tap dancing around and engage in this tail wagging the dog phenomenon, which is when a detail of a story overwhelms the rest of the story to the point that it's not about what it should be about anymore. This is when people start to lose faith in your reporting. And I really think that this BuzzFeed thing where they got it wrong is a tail wagging the dog moment. Because if you go back to and I know this is such a cliche now referencing Watergate, but there was a critical moment in the Watergate investigation, so important that it was sort of the climactic moment in that movie, All the President's Men, that ends weird. It just sort of ends with, that happened and they didn't get fired. They made a mistake and they didn't get fired. And then they're at their typewriters where it all ends up being, the truth comes out and, Nixon was a crook and the rest is history. But in sort of the climactic moment of All the President's Men, Woodward and Bernstein make an assumption based on a cryptic comment from a source. This is in the movie. And it's wrong. They got the wrong person. They got a critical detail wrong. And Nixon pounced. And that particular story, that piece of reporting was wrong. It does not mean the greater trail they were on, that there was something seriously sketchy going on in the Nixon White House. That didn't mean they were wrong about that. And BuzzFeed being wrong about written corroboration to Trump telling Michael Cohen to lie does not mean that Trump didn't tell Michael Cohen to lie, or more accurately, Michael Cohen is prepared to tell Congress that Donald Trump told him to lie. And the Mueller team did not knock down that element of the story. That is still in play. Now, the problem is you can't take Michael Cohen as a reliable source for anything. He's a proven liar. But if we don't let the tail wag the dog, we just recognize that this isn't, happy day for Trump. Better reporters than the people at BuzzFeed are gonna get on this, and they're going to find the truth, which is probably not as far from what BuzzFeed reported as some of Trump's supporters might want to believe it is. It could not be written corroboration. It could be human corroboration from enough sources. Enough people's stories are significantly similar that there's corroboration there. It could come from other sources. I suspect that my guess, and this is a guess. I'm labeling this as a guess. I think that perhaps the implication of the third parties, Trump's kids, other people in the Trump organization sort of thing, participating in this, being fully aware of the lie, I think that may have been what the Mueller team was objecting to, because that is implicating, that is falsely accusing people who could potentially be innocent of all of this. I mean, don't forget Bernie Madoff's kids. They were part of the company, but they didn't know anything their father was actually doing. And talk about a family that got ruined by just having a bad reputation because of what the patriarch did. So that's my guess. Again, I have no reason to say I know anything. I'm just trying to think what a possibility could be that the dog in question of, Trump's suborn perjury, that's not knocked down. The fact that there was written evidence, the way and it's possible that BuzzFeed sources just got it wrong, that they accurately reported what their sources told them, which is why it's really important to cultivate lots and lots and lots of sources. And that's what you can't do in games journalism. You rely on leaks and opinions of people who may work on a completely different floor of a game company, but they overheard or saw something, or they got to play a demo. The information is not very good because everything has to be kept so under wraps. These rollouts are so critical. Everything's all walled off, and there is no transparency in gaming. And that's why I say you can't do proper journalism in gaming. It's more like tabloid journalism. Now, that's totally fair that there should be more transparency in government, since the average taxpayer doesn't pay a game developer salary, except in Poland and in parts of Canada where a lot of tax money goes into keeping those studios afloat. There's a lot of grants in this country. But anyway, that's my take on it. I'm not saying I'm right in that guess. That is straight up a guess. It's what could be. And that's how you know someone cares about what they're doing and cares about getting it right. They separate, well, let's extrapolate, but make it very clear that we are guessing. We have no insider information on this versus this is what we know. That's good journalism. I haven't, like I said, I'm sure CNN was worse because they could just get so hysterical. But I was watching MSNBC as it happened. At least in MSNBC's case, they were adamant that they couldn't confirm the story. So I don't think this was a bad weekend for journalism on that point. This is BuzzFeed gonna BuzzFeed. The way MSNBC handled the allegations against the Women's March, different story. I'm out of time. Thanks for watching. If you're feeling a little bit confused or a lot confused, don't feel bad. If you don't know what to believe, don't feel bad. All you need to know is this is why it's important to get your news from a variety of sources. And even though reputable outlets do make mistakes, that does not mean they are not better sources of news than something like BuzzFeed that is more interested in clicks than getting it right. They are less likely to make mistakes as often. And when they do make mistakes, they clean it up a lot better. Except in the case of CNN, who kind of made excuses. This is why I don't watch CNN anymore. Okay, thanks for watching.